It was a bright afternoon, the kind of day where the sun seemed to make everything shine a little more than usual. The streets were buzzing with people, cars, and noise. In the middle of all this, one man was determined to make himself stand out. He was a wealthy CEO, someone known in the city for his money, his expensive suits, and above all, his collection of luxury cars. He had a reputation for enjoying the spotlight, and he loved nothing more than showing off his prized possessions. That day, his Lamborghini was the star of the show. The bright paint sparkled under the sunlight, drawing stares from nearly everyone who passed by. The man was surrounded by a group of friends and colleagues, all laughing and joking as he bragged about his car. But he had another idea in mind. He wanted to entertain the crowd in a way that only he thought was clever. A prank. Something that would make everyone laugh and remind them of his power and wealth. He told them he would act as if his Lamborghini had a serious problem, something so bad that it needed urgent repair. Then he would pick someone completely unexpected from the crowd to try and fix it. He looked around, scanning the faces of people nearby. There were young boys, older men, a couple of curious women watching from a distance. But his eyes landed on one young black girl standing quietly at the edge of the crowd. She wasn't dressed like a mechanic, and she didn't carry herself like someone who would normally be involved in cars. She seemed more like a regular passerby, probably just stopping to see the expensive car like everyone else. To him, she looked like the perfect person for his prank. He called out to her with a grin, asking her to step forward. The girl hesitated at first, surprised that he had chosen her out of everyone standing there. The crowd turned their heads toward her, curious about what was going to happen next. The CEO's voice grew louder as he said that his car was having trouble, and he needed her help to fix it. The words were dripping with sarcasm. He wasn't asking because he believed she could actually fix anything. He was asking because he thought the idea itself was ridiculous. His friends burst into laughter, encouraging him to keep going. The girl's eyes widened slightly, but she didn't walk away. Instead, she looked at him calmly, as if weighing her options. She could ignore him and leave, but there was something about his smug smile that pushed her to stay. She knew he wanted her to look foolish, but she wasn't the kind of person who liked being underestimated. Slowly, she stepped forward, her expression steady. The CEO chuckled and made a show of introducing her to the crowd. "Here we have a new mechanic," he announced as if it were part of a comedy act. Some people in the crowd laughed. Others pulled out their phones to record the moment. The girl stayed quiet, not giving them the reaction they expected. She glanced at the car, her eyes sharp and observant, though no one seemed to notice. He leaned against the Lamborghini, pretending to look worried about the so-called problem. "It's been acting strange all morning," he said loudly, still mocking. "Maybe you can help me out. What do you think? Can you handle a machine like this?" His tone made it clear he didn't believe a word he was saying. The girl didn't flinch. She simply nodded and said she would take a look. Her calmness threw him off for a moment. He expected her to laugh nervously or refuse outright. Instead, she agreed without hesitation. The crowd's laughter softened, replaced by murmurs of curiosity. They wanted to see how this would play out. As she moved closer to the Lamborghini, the CEO smirked and gestured toward the hood. "Go ahead, show us what you've got," he said, still treating the whole thing like entertainment. His friends chuckled, some even whispering that this was going to be good. They were ready to watch her struggle, maybe even embarrass herself. The girl, however, didn't look nervous at all. She walked around the car slowly, as though she was studying it. Her movements weren't random, they were careful, deliberate. She asked him to open the hood. The CEO raised his eyebrows but complied, playing along with the joke. As the hood lifted, the crowd leaned in, expecting the moment where she would freeze or admit she didn't know what to do. But instead, she leaned forward and began examining the engine carefully. Her eyes moved with focus, her hands resting lightly on the edges as she studied the parts. She wasn't in a rush and she didn't seem intimidated. This caught a few people off guard. The CEO crossed his arms and pretended to look patient. "So, mechanic," he said loudly, "do you see the problem?" His tone was playful, but his eyes betrayed a hint of surprise at how calmly she was handling herself. The girl didn't answer right away. Instead, she looked back at him and asked for a basic tool. The crowd laughed again, assuming she was just playing along, but there was something in her voice that sounded serious. She wasn't joking. She knew exactly what she wanted. The CEO blinked. For a second, he didn't know how to respond. Then, still smirking, he told one of his friends to fetch the tool. He assumed this was part of the act, something that would make the moment funnier. As the tool was handed to her, she took it without hesitation and bent back over the engine. The crowd grew quieter now. Some of them exchanged looks, wondering if she actually knew what she was doing. Others kept recording, sensing that this might turn into something unexpected. The CEO, though still trying to keep up his playful mask, shifted slightly where he stood. He hadn't imagined this prank going any further than a few laughs. But now something about the girl's confidence was unsettling him. She adjusted the tool, checked a few parts, and then asked for another item. Again, she was specific. This wasn't random guessing. Her hands moved with certainty, her eyes narrowing as she inspected the car's insides. The CEO gave a short laugh to hide his unease, but the truth was starting to creep in. She might actually know more than he thought. The crowd had gone from full laughter to a mix of silence and whispers. People leaned closer, curious, intrigued. They were no longer watching a silly prank. They were watching something far more interesting. The CEO noticed the shift too, and it made him uncomfortable. This wasn't the reaction he had planned. He wanted to humiliate her, not look like the one being outsmarted. Still, he told himself it was only the beginning. There was no way she could actually fix something as complex as his Lamborghini. He would let her play around a little, then laugh it off and end the show. That was his plan. But as he watched her working calmly, the nagging thought wouldn't leave his mind. What if she actually could do it? The crowd grew bigger with every passing minute. People passing by slowed down, curious to see why a group was gathered around a luxury car. Some came closer, holding up their phones, eager to capture whatever was happening. The CEO stood tall, pretending he was still in control, but his eyes kept darting toward the girl as she continued to inspect the Lamborghini. Her focus was sharp, her hands steady, and her voice calm as she asked for another tool. The CEO laughed, trying to keep the attention on himself. "Look at this," he said loudly. "She's really taking it seriously." His tone was still mocking, but his laugh didn't carry the same confidence as before. A few of his friends chuckled with him, but the rest of the crowd was too busy watching the girl. Their amusement was slowly turning into curiosity. She didn't respond to his remarks. Instead, she adjusted her grip on the tool and leaned closer to the engine. She wasn't distracted by the laughter or the eyes staring at her. Every small sound, every faint smell from the car told her something. It was clear she wasn't guessing. She was analyzing. One man in the crowd whispered, "She looks like she actually knows what she's doing." Another nodded, saying, "Yeah, this doesn't seem like a joke anymore." The whispers grew, and more people leaned in, eager to see the outcome. The CEO clapped his hands together, trying to stir up laughter again. "Well, let's see how long it takes her to give up," he said, forcing a grin. He didn't like the way people were starting to admire her. This was supposed to be his show, his prank, and yet the spotlight was slipping away. The girl, still calm, tightened a small part with the tool and then straightened up slightly. She wiped her hand on her jeans and asked for another specific item. This time there was no laughter. The crowd grew quiet, waiting for the CEO's response. His smirk faltered for just a second, but he quickly covered it with another chuckle. "All right," he said, handing it over. "Let's see what the new mechanic can do." As she worked, the Lamborghini's polished body reflected the sunlight, making the moment feel even more dramatic. The expensive car, the arrogant CEO, and the girl calmly working. It was a scene nobody had expected. People in the crowd whispered that this was going to be one for the internet. Some were already live streaming, and the comments on their screens were flooding in, filled with curiosity about whether she would succeed or fail. The CEO leaned closer, his voice low this time. "You know, this car is worth more than you'll ever make in your life," he said, trying to shake her confidence. "Are you sure you want to keep pretending you can fix it?" His words were sharp, designed to embarrass her, but she didn't flinch. She simply looked at him for a moment and said, "I'm not pretending." Her voice was steady, not loud, but clear enough for the crowd to hear. The sentence hung in the air and it made the CEO step back slightly. Some people in the crowd smiled at her confidence, while others clapped softly, impressed by her courage. Ignoring him, she returned to the car and kept working. The way her hands moved showed she wasn't new to this. She loosened a part here, tightened another there, checking connections with precision. The crowd's silence was heavy, broken only by the faint clinking of metal and the occasional sound of her adjusting something. The CEO's friends shifted uncomfortably. One of them muttered, "What if she actually pulls this off?" The CEO shot him a look, but he didn't answer. Deep down, he was asking himself the same question. Minutes passed, and still the girl didn't waver. Sweat glistened on her forehead under the afternoon sun. But her focus never broke. The Lamborghini stood like a challenge before her, and she seemed determined to meet it head-on. Finally, she looked up and asked the CEO to step closer. He raised his eyebrows, unsure what she was planning, but he obeyed. She pointed to a small section of the engine and explained in simple terms what was wrong. The way she spoke wasn't filled with complicated words, but it carried confidence and knowledge. She knew exactly what she was talking about. The CEO blinked, caught off guard. He had expected her to stumble or guess wildly, but instead she had pinpointed the problem as if she had done this 100 times before. The crowd leaned in, eager to hear more. "Do you really think she's right?" someone whispered. Another replied, "She sounds like she knows more about cars than he does." The CEO tried to laugh it off. "Oh, anyone could have guessed that," he said, waving his hand dismissively. But there was a nervous edge to his voice now. He was starting to feel the pressure of the crowd's eyes and, worse, their shifting loyalty. They were no longer laughing at the girl. They were watching her with respect. The girl didn't argue with him. She simply went back to work, adjusting the part she had pointed out. Her calm silence spoke louder than any words could. She wasn't here to win an argument. She was here to prove herself through action. A few more minutes passed. The CEO's arms were crossed, but his fingers tapped nervously against his sleeve. His friends were quiet now, their earlier laughter replaced by unease. The girl's confidence had unsettled everyone. Finally, she put the tool down and stepped back. Her hands were smudged with a little grease, but her expression was composed. She told the CEO to try starting the car. The crowd gasped. Was she serious? Could she have actually fixed something on such a complex, high-end machine? All eyes turned to the CEO. He hesitated, his pride battling with his curiosity. If he tried and nothing happened, he could still laugh it off as her failure. But if it worked, if the Lamborghini roared to life in front of everyone, it would be his prank that backfired. For a moment, he stood frozen, caught between his own arrogance and the growing weight of expectation from the crowd. Finally, with a stiff smile, he slid into the driver's seat. The air was tense, every single person holding their breath as he pressed the start button. The engine gave a heavy rumble, louder than before, smoother, stronger. The Lamborghini's growl filled the air, sending a shiver through the crowd. People gasped, then erupted into cheers. The girl's face broke into the faintest smile as she wiped her hands again. The CEO gripped the steering wheel tightly, his face pale. He tried to hide his shock, but it was too late. Everyone had seen it, the disbelief in his eyes, the way his smirk had vanished. The prank had turned on him, and the crowd knew it. Phones were raised higher, recording every second. Cheers grew louder, some people even shouting words of encouragement toward the girl. She didn't bask in the applause, though. She simply stepped back, letting the moment speak for itself. The CEO climbed out of the car, forcing a smile, but his voice cracked slightly as he said, "Well, maybe she just got lucky." But nobody believed him. They had seen the way she worked, the calm certainty in her actions. Luck had nothing to do with it. The crowd knew the truth. She wasn't just some random girl picked for a prank. She was someone who carried real skill, and she had just proved it in front of everyone. And for the first time that day, the CEO didn't look like the most powerful person in the crowd. The sound of the Lamborghini's engine echoed through the street, deep and powerful, almost as if it wanted everyone to know it was alive again. The crowd broke into cheers, clapping, whistling, and shouting words of amazement. Phones were held higher than before, capturing every angle of the moment. What was supposed to be a joke had turned into something unforgettable. And the focus of it all was not the wealthy CEO, but the young girl standing calmly beside the car. She didn't jump up and down or act like she had done something extraordinary. She just smiled softly, wiped her hands on her jeans, and stepped back as if she had simply done what needed to be done. The calmness in her face was almost more powerful than the roar of the engine. It made people wonder, who was she really? The CEO sat frozen in the driver's seat for a moment. His fingers gripped the steering wheel so tightly that his knuckles turned pale. He had been so sure this prank would make him look clever and powerful. Instead, it had flipped on him, leaving him embarrassed in front of strangers, friends, and countless cameras. Slowly, he climbed out of the car, trying to force his usual confident smile, but his face betrayed him. Everyone could see the disbelief written across his expression. One of his friends whispered, "She actually fixed it." "No way." Another nodded, replying under his breath, "She's the real deal. Did you see how fast she did it?" Their words were caught on a few recordings, adding more fuel to the moment. The CEO cleared his throat, raising his voice louder than usual. "Well," he said, "maybe it wasn't as bad as I thought. Just a small issue, you know. Anyone could have handled it." He laughed nervously, hoping to regain some of his dignity, but the crowd wasn't buying it. They had seen the girl's focus, the certainty in her movements, the way she had handled the tools like they belonged in her hands. This wasn't luck, and everyone knew it. The girl didn't bother correcting him. She let him talk, knowing the truth didn't need defending. The engine's roar and the cheers of the crowd spoke louder than anything else. Instead, she leaned against a railing nearby, her expression calm and almost distant, as though she wasn't even surprised by what she had accomplished. People from the crowd started stepping closer to her, asking questions. "How did you do that?" one person asked, wide-eyed. "Do you work in a garage?" Another said. The girl answered politely, keeping her voice humble. She explained that she had grown up around cars, that she had spent years watching and helping her father work on engines. What looked impossible to others was simply familiar to her. Her words spread quickly among the crowd. Phones captured her explanation, and comments began flying on live streams and social media posts. "She's a genius," one viewer wrote. "The CEO looks embarrassed," another comment read. The internet was eating up the story in real time. The CEO's forced grin faltered again as he noticed the shift. People weren't looking at him anymore. He wasn't the star of the moment. He was the background. Every camera was pointed at the girl, every cheer directed toward her. The prank had gone completely wrong. Instead of making her look foolish, it had made him look arrogant and small. Still, he wasn't ready to give up. He stepped closer to her, his tone sharper now. "All right," he said, "you got lucky this time. But a Lamborghini isn't some regular car. It takes real experts to handle something like this. Don't get ahead of yourself." His words carried a mixture of frustration and pride, but they didn't shake her. She looked at him with the same calmness she had carried all along. "It wasn't luck," she said simply. Then she turned back toward the car and added, "And it's running better now than it was before." The crowd reacted instantly. Cheers grew louder. People clapped, and some even laughed at the CEO's expense. His face turned red, though he tried to hide it. He opened his mouth to argue, but closed it again when he realized there was nothing left to say. The car itself was proof. A few more people approached the girl, congratulating her, praising her talent. She thanked them with a shy smile, not letting the attention get to her head. While others would have soaked in the spotlight, she seemed almost uninterested in fame. For her, fixing the car wasn't about proving anything to anyone. It was simply about doing what she knew. The CEO, on the other hand, struggled to keep his composure. He pulled his friends aside, whispering angrily about how this wasn't supposed to happen. "I wanted to make her look silly," he muttered, "and now I look like the fool." His friends tried to comfort him, but they couldn't deny the truth. The prank had backfired spectacularly. As the crowd continued to buzz, the girl started packing up the tools she had used. She placed them neatly back into the box, treating them with the same respect she had shown the car. Some people continued to film her every move, realizing they were witnessing something that would soon spread far beyond this street. One elderly man stepped forward from the crowd. His voice carried warmth as he said, "Young lady, you've done something remarkable today. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." The girl nodded with a grateful smile. That single moment of recognition seemed to mean more to her than all the cheering combined. Meanwhile, the CEO couldn't escape the growing embarrassment. Every phone pointed toward him now caught his uncomfortable expression, his failed attempt to brush it all off. For someone who thrived on power and control, The loss of attention felt unbearable. He tried once more to shift the mood in his favor. All right, he said loudly, clapping his hands as if to take back control. She did well. I'll give her that. But let's not make this bigger than it is. This car just needed a small adjustment. Nothing more. He laughed, hoping people would agree. But the crowd's response was clear. They weren't laughing with him anymore. They were cheering for her. The sound of admiration drowned out his words, and his laughter faded awkwardly. The girl stood silently, her calmness unshaken. In that moment, it became clear to everyone watching. Respect and talent will always shine brighter than arrogance. She hadn't needed fancy clothes, wealth, or loud words to win the crowd. Her quiet skill had done it all. The CEO finally stepped back, realizing he had lost control of the situation. His prank was over, and instead of him being the clever hero of the story, the girl had taken that place effortlessly. His eyes lingered on her for a long moment, filled with something he rarely felt: doubt. For the first time, he questioned whether his wealth and status truly made him superior. The crowd slowly began to disperse, though many stayed behind to talk to the girl or ask for pictures. The CEO slipped into the background, his usual confidence dimmed. The Lamborghini still gleamed in the sunlight, but now it no longer represented his power. Instead, it stood as a reminder of the lesson he had unwillingly learned. Never underestimate someone based on how they look. The girl, on the other hand, walked away with quiet dignity. She hadn't asked for the spotlight, but she had earned it. Her steady steps and calm smile left a lasting impression on everyone who had witnessed the scene. What started as a prank had turned into something much bigger. It was no longer about a car or a joke. It had become a story of respect, skill, and humility, one that nobody there would forget anytime soon. The engine's deep growl finally faded when the CEO shut off the Lamborghini. But the excitement in the crowd didn't fade at all. People were still buzzing, talking over each other, pointing toward the girl who had just done the unthinkable. Some were replaying the clips they had recorded, showing friends around them. Others were already uploading it online, their fingers flying across their screens. The girl, however, stood quietly, almost shy in the face of so much attention. She didn't puff up her chest or throw her hands in the air in victory. Instead, she folded her arms lightly, glanced once more at the car, and then looked away. To her, it was just another repair, something she had been doing for years. But to everyone else, it was shocking, even unbelievable. The CEO stood awkwardly nearby, trying to recover his confidence. His usual smirk was gone, replaced by a stiff smile that didn't reach his eyes. He had planned to humiliate her for laughs, but now he was the one people were laughing at quietly behind their phones. He cleared his throat, stepped forward, and tried to take back control of the moment. "Well," he said loudly, "you all saw it. She got it running. But don't think this means she's an expert. These machines are complicated. One lucky guess doesn't make a mechanic." His words echoed with defensiveness, and instead of applause, they were met with silence. Some people even frowned, unimpressed by his attempt to downplay what had just happened. The girl turned her head and looked at him. Her expression wasn't angry or proud. It was calm, almost pitying. "It wasn't luck," she said softly, her voice steady. "I knew what I was doing." That sentence hit harder than anything else. It wasn't shouted, it wasn't dramatic, but it carried a quiet strength that made people in the crowd nod. They believed her because they had seen it with their own eyes. The CEO forced another laugh, but this time it cracked slightly. He knew the truth, even if he didn't want to admit it. She hadn't just fixed the car, she had exposed his arrogance. Then someone in the crowd shouted, "How did you learn all that?" The girl hesitated for a moment, then answered. She explained that she grew up watching her father work in a small garage. He didn't own fancy cars like Lamborghinis, but he fixed everything that came his way. Old trucks, motorcycles, broken down family vans. She was just a child at the time, but she loved spending hours beside him, holding tools, asking questions, learning little by little. Over time, she had grown from being a helper into someone who could fix things herself. When her father wasn't around, she practiced. She made mistakes, she learned, and she improved. Cars became less of a mystery and more of a language she understood. As she spoke, her voice was still quiet and humble, but the crowd listened intently. People nodded, impressed by her story. One woman whispered, "She's amazing. She didn't even brag, just told it plain." Another said, "She deserves way more credit than she's getting." The CEO shifted uncomfortably again. He realized that the crowd was hanging on her every word, not his. For a man used to being the center of attention, it stung. Still, he tried one more time to regain some respect. He clapped his hands once and said, "All right, enough of the story time. She fixed a car, sure, but that doesn't mean she can handle everything. Let's not act like this is some miracle." He gave a short laugh, but no one joined in. Instead, people gave him sharp looks, as if silently asking why he couldn't just admit she was talented. The girl didn't argue with him. She simply shrugged, as if his opinion didn't matter. And in truth, it didn't. The crowd had already chosen who they respected more. One young man stepped forward from the group. "You did in minutes what most people couldn't do in hours," he said directly to her. "That's no small thing. Don't let him make it sound less." His words drew more cheers and claps from the crowd, and the CEO's face burned red. The girl gave the young man a small nod of thanks, then turned her attention back to the Lamborghini. She said almost casually, "It wasn't even a big problem. Just something he didn't notice because he wasn't paying attention." The crowd erupted with laughter, not mocking her but enjoying her quiet honesty. The CEO's jaw tightened. He wanted to snap back, but he knew if he did, it would only make him look worse. For the first time, he felt speechless. He had built his entire image around being powerful, untouchable, and clever. Yet here he was, standing silently while a girl with no wealth, no suit, and no spotlight before this day had humbled him in front of everyone. More people gathered around the girl, asking her questions, complimenting her knowledge. Some even asked if she worked at a garage nearby, wanting her help with their own cars. She answered politely, saying she usually helped her father and neighbors when they needed it. To her, fixing cars wasn't about money or fame. It was about love for the craft and helping others. The CEO stood to the side, watching all of this unfold. Inside, a storm brewed. He wasn't used to being ignored. He wasn't used to being humbled. Yet he couldn't escape the truth staring him in the face. Her skill had left him without words. One by one, the crowd started to move on, though many stayed behind to take photos with the girl. She didn't pose dramatically. She just smiled lightly and stood with them, patient and kind. Those who walked away were already calling friends, already sharing the story, already making sure the world would hear about the girl who had outshined a rich man and his Lamborghini. The CEO leaned against the car, watching, thinking. For a moment, he wondered what would happen if he admitted defeat. Would it ruin his image forever? Or would people actually respect him more if he showed humility? It was a thought he wasn't used to having. He stayed quiet, staring at the girl as she talked to the last few people still gathered around. For the first time in a long while, he didn't know what to say, what to do, or how to act. His arrogance had been silenced by something he hadn't expected, pure, undeniable talent, and deep down, though he didn't want to admit it, he was impressed. The street was finally beginning to calm down. The large crowd that had gathered around the Lamborghini slowly started to thin out, though groups of people still lingered nearby, talking excitedly about what they had just witnessed. The videos were already spreading online, and everyone knew this wasn't just another random street scene. It was something that people would be talking about for days, maybe weeks. The girl stood a little apart, quietly collecting herself after all the noise and attention. She didn't look like someone who had just embarrassed a wealthy CEO in front of a whole crowd. She didn't even look like someone who had just fixed a luxury car. She looked calm, collected, and almost as if this whole thing wasn't such a big deal to her. But to everyone else, it was a huge deal. The CEO leaned against his car, his expensive watch glinting under the sun, his posture stiff. He had been silent for a while, watching as strangers surrounded the girl with admiration and respect. His pride felt bruised, but there was something deeper stirring inside him, something he didn't want to admit. Respect. For years, he had lived in a bubble where money and power seemed to place him above everyone else. He was used to being admired, feared, or envied, never challenged. And yet here he was, completely thrown off balance by someone he had looked down on just minutes earlier. The last few onlookers finally drifted away, leaving behind only a small group. The CEO, a couple of his friends, and the girl. She turned to leave, clearly ready to walk away from all of it, but the CEO suddenly spoke up. "Wait," he said, his voice steadier now, stripped of the sarcasm it had carried all day. The girl paused, looking back at him with a neutral expression. For a moment, he struggled with his words. His pride still wanted to hold him back, but he knew the truth couldn't be denied. "I owe you an apology," he finally admitted, his voice lower than usual. His friends glanced at each other in surprise. This was not something they were used to hearing from him. The girl raised her eyebrows slightly, but she didn't interrupt. She just waited. He sighed and continued. "When I called you out earlier, I thought it would be funny. I thought I could make everyone laugh at your expense. But instead I ended up being the fool." His words were slow but genuine. "You proved something today, not just to me but to everyone who saw this." The girl's expression softened slightly. She didn't gloat or mock him. She simply nodded. "It's not about proving something," she said. "I just did what I knew how to do." Her humility struck him even harder. She had every reason to boast, every reason to throw his own arrogance back in his face, but she didn't. That made her victory even greater. One of his friends, who had been quiet until now, spoke up. "She's got more skill than half the mechanics I've met," he said honestly. The CEO shot him a look, but there was no denying it was true. The CEO took a deep breath, then looked directly at her. "You have talent, real talent, and I was too blind to see it because of my own ego." He hesitated, then added, "If you ever want an opportunity, I'd like to help. Maybe a job, maybe training, maybe something bigger. Whatever you want. You deserve it." The offer caught her off guard. She tilted her head, studying him carefully, trying to see if he was being sincere or just trying to save face. But for once his tone was genuine. There was no mocking, no sarcasm, just honesty. She thought for a moment, then said quietly, "I don't need favors. I just need respect. That's all I ask." Her words landed like a stone dropped into water, sending ripples through the air. The CEO lowered his gaze, nodding slowly. "Respect," he repeated. "You've more than earned it." There was a long silence. The Lamborghini gleamed between them, a symbol of wealth and pride, but also of the lesson learned that day. The CEO finally extended his hand toward her. At first she hesitated, unsure if she wanted to accept. But then she reached out and shook it. The handshake wasn't about friendship or deals. It was about acknowledgement. One of the CEO's friends clapped softly, breaking the silence. "Well," he said with a smile, "I think today taught us all something." The girl gave a small nod, then stepped back. She didn't linger, didn't bask in the moment. She simply said, "Take care of your car, and don't underestimate people." With that, she turned and started to walk away. The CEO watched her go, the sound of her footsteps fading into the noise of the city. For the first time in a long while, he felt truly humbled. The expensive suit he wore, the flashy watch on his wrist, even the Lamborghini behind him. All of it suddenly felt small compared to the quiet strength of someone who had nothing but knowledge and determination. As she disappeared into the distance, he whispered to himself, "She left me speechless." The story didn't end there, of course. By the time he got home, his phone was buzzing nonstop. Videos of the incident had already gone viral. Headlines were popping up online. "Girl fixes CEO's Lamborghini and silences crowd. Arrogant prank backfires, leaves wealthy man embarrassed." At first, the CEO's pride hurt all over again. But as he scrolled through the comments, he noticed something surprising. People weren't just mocking him, they were celebrating her. They were inspired by her skill, her confidence, her humility. And slowly he realized that maybe this wasn't his downfall. Maybe it was a chance to change. Meanwhile, the girl returned home to her family. She didn't brag about what had happened. She simply washed the grease from her hands and went on with her evening as if nothing unusual had occurred. When her father asked how her day had been, she just smiled and said, "It was interesting." But deep inside, she knew the world had seen her. Not as a joke, not as someone to underestimate, but as someone capable, someone strong. And that was enough for her. The CEO, lying awake that night, thought about her words again and again. "I don't need favors. I just need respect." They echoed in his mind, louder than the roar of his Lamborghini ever could. For once in his life, he understood that respect couldn't be bought, demanded, or faked. It had to be earned. And that young girl, without money or power, had earned it from an entire crowd and even from him. The next morning, the world was still buzzing with the story. The CEO had a choice to make. He could deny it, ignore it, or embrace it. He chose the last. For the first time in a long while, he felt lighter, freer, as though a weight of arrogance had been lifted. And somewhere across town, the girl continued her life, fixing cars, learning more each day, never knowing just how many people she had inspired. Because in the end, it wasn't just about a Lamborghini. It was about respect, humility, and the simple truth that talent knows no boundaries.